Welcome back to Good Day Atlanta. It's a celebration of patriotism, politics, and history that dates back to the earliest days of America. Election cakes are making a comeback this year. Chef Daniel Bowers from the Art Institute of Atlanta is here to show us how to make one of these. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. We're glad you're here.
You.
Hey, perfect timing, right?
For Election Day?
Yeah, get us a cake.
Well, we couldn't
made
have
up
any other cake for that. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, what's the history behind this? Honestly, I've never heard of election cakes before.
I know, and this is it's an unusual cake, but actually this cake dates back at least a couple of hundred years. It goes back to the early days of our country when people would travel far and wide from their communities, and they would come together in the center of a town in order to celebrate Election Day. And so it has become a tradition to try and bring people out to vote. And so this was the earliest attempt to try and get guys excited about going to the polls and to go vote. And
it's not a bad idea.
It's not a bad idea. And sometimes we need something to really get us excited about elections.
That's true. Okay, so has the recipe changed much now than how it was
It probably has. I'm sure it's evolved quite a bit over the years. And so the recipe that we're using and that you could probably find online has been developed by our Art Institute out of Raleigh, Durham, and one of our chefs out there.
Okay, so it's tried, it's tested,
exactly.
it is good to go. I think it's worth mentioning too that the size of these cakes has changed over the years.
Absolutely. So imagine a couple hundred years ago, you get your village or your town together and you've got several hundred people. You're going to make a cake that's going to feed the entire town.
Yeah, you got to have a lot of materials.
You have a lot of materials. So some of the early recipes that this recipe was derived from, they would use as much as 10 pounds of flour or 10 pounds of butter. So it was a big cake.
Yeah.
They were big cakes that were meant to feed a lot of
people.
So
we've scaled it down just a bit, which is good. But what are the ingredients that we need for this?
So we're going to start, and this is an unusual cake because it actually starts as a mix between really a bread and a cake. So we're actually going to start with what we call a sponge, which I was mixing a little bit earlier, and this is actually yeast with flour and water.
Okay.
And we're going to let that actually kind of get bubbly and start to rise. So it starts with a little bit of a bread sponge. Then we're also going to have some fruit, and today we're going to use some golden raisins and some cherries. Both of these would have been readily available here in the East Coast a couple hundred years ago.
Okay.
And those are going to get soaked in whiskey.
Ooh, that's what we've been smelling.
Exactly.
Hey, it's pretty strong.
It is pretty strong, but I tell you what, the neat thing about this cake too is that this is going to get heated up before it goes into our cake batter, so most of the alcohol is going to get cooked off.
Okay.
So if you don't want alcohol in your food, it's not a big deal. If you do want alcohol in your food, we can make a whiskey glaze later on and make it a little bit more fun.
Very nice. So we'll mix that up together.
So we're going to mix our fruit with the whiskey and a little bit of brown sugar, and we're going to set that aside. Then I'm going to reach over here in front of you real
what is
quick.
that? That looks good.
This is just butter. Of course it looks
Are you
good.
serious?
Yes.
Okay, I thought that was some kind of like icing or like a frosting to go. That is just butter.
I know, exactly.
That's what makes it good, right?
And that's what makes it good. So we're going to start with about 6 ounces of butter here.
Okay.
I'm going to take this same whisk out. And then really what this gets is you can see my butter's nice and soft, and I've already creamed it a little bit to get going.
Yeah, so worth mentioning that this is a fat-free recipe too,
exactly.
right?
This is really healthy. You can see that this is really a healthy recipe. We're going to add a little bit of brown sugar and a little bit of granulated sugar to that butter, and we're just going to whisk that until it comes together and cream that together. So this is kind of what makes this recipe interesting, is we're doing kind of a cake creaming method, but at the same time we're going to incorporate this bread sponge. So it's a little bit of an unusual recipe. To my sugar and to my butter, I'm just going to add a few eggs.
Okay.
And we're going to just bring that together.
Coming together.
Lots of fun. Here we go. And then as soon as we get this back together, which shouldn't take us too long.
What are we adding?
There we go. Look at that.
You got that
I know.
super
And one of the reasons I wanted to do this by hand too was to show you that you don't need a mixer, you don't need an electric mixer, you don't need a big KitchenAid or anything like that.
So is this actually how you would recommend
You can actually do this by hand. I mean, I really don't mind doing it by hand. It is a little bit faster if you have a mixer at home.
Sure, that's not taking too long though.
This doesn't take any time.
Yeah, that's not bad.
And then into that we're going to put that sponge that we made earlier.
Okay.
And so this is just flour, water, and yeast.
Okay, and you mentioned that's had a little bit of time to sit.
That would usually take about half an hour to sit and to ferment and come together. Exactly. And then it'll start to be bubbly and you'll really see that yeast starting to act. Then that gets whisked in, and you'll see it gets a little bit thicker as that's coming in. And then finally, we're going to take the fruit for just a second. We're going to go with our flour now. Another cup and a half of flour.
Cup and a half, okay.
And then our spices. What makes this cake really interesting, again, a little allspice that I ground fresh, a little bit of salt.
Okay.
Just for flavor. We have some nutmeg.
Gotta have that.
We gotta have that. And we have some cinnamon.
Okay, so this is what's giving it that good flavor.
So this is what's really going to add that flavor to our cake, exactly. And so we'll just bring that together real quick.
Okay.
And then into that, we're going to put our fruit.
And you put the whole thing, the rum
whole
and
thing,
the fruit.
the whiskey, the bourbon. So
Whiskey, it's whiskey,
yeah,
that's right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because we're doing an American cake, let's use American liquor, right?
like
Let's
that.
use bourbon. I mean,
That makes
we're
sense.
you know, especially since we're neighbors of Tennessee, let's
Sure.
support our friends up in Tennessee and use bourbon.
So once we get that mixed up, what's our step after that?
Then it's going to go into our bundt pan.
Okay.
So this we would have buttered and floured so that nothing's going to stick to it. Our batter is going to go directly into our bundt pan, and we're going to let it set for about 2 hours.
Okay.
And that's going to let the yeast start to activate, and it's going to let the yeast start to use those sugars, and it'll rise up. And when it's about 2/3 or 3/4 of the way up to the top, we're going to go into the oven.
That's probably a pretty important step.
It
So
is.
you got to be patient.
Yes, exactly.
You got to have the time to do that.
This is a cake that you can't make really, really fast because that yeast does take time to react and it does take time to rise.
Sure. Okay. And we're getting low on time. So you said
once
how
it
long?
goes into the oven, we're going to cook for about 45 minutes. When it comes out, and here we used a little bit of a different pan. This is called a Kugelhof pan.
I like the size of that.
Hopefully it'll come out. No!
Come on!
Oh, well,
This
that's
might
okay.
help.
But look, we have some here, but this is
Yeah.
the same one I did just out of this pan. So we'll try that.
Looks so good. And then it looks like it's just a kind of glaze on the top, right?
Exactly. Then the glaze is really just powdered sugar with a little bit of milk and a little bit of vanilla. And we've just drizzled that glaze over the top. And here we did a little red, white, and blue
Love
just to make it a
this.
little election day fun.
Yes, this is
Yay.
something that I think you could include the kids in. Include them in
Absolutely,
the
especially
election
in the
process.
decoration.
Sure.
And so you can see we had some fun. We put some little stars on there today. You could certainly use sprinkles or do things like that to make it a little more fun. And I even thought like a couple of little flags on there for
it's
election day would
perfect.
be really
Absolutely perfect. Helping us get into the patriotic spirit for Election Day. For more information on today's election cake or the Art Institute of Atlanta, just click on the viewer information story under the Good Day Atlanta app. Chef Daniel Bowers, thank you so much for coming today.
pleasure.
Wonderful,
Thanks for having
wonderful idea. Got to